Spicing up your e-learning with simple animations is a great way to engage and immerse your learners, but using animation programs can be time-consuming, expensive, and not as customizable as you'd hope. But you don't have to spend a lot of time and money to create animations. So stick around to learn how you can create quick and effective animations using a tool that's probably already installed on your computer. Hello, I'm Sabrina. When I was trying to land my first client, I was asked to do a sample project and I wanted to experiment with animation. But I found that tools like Beyond were really great, but I was working on a limited budget, limited time, and I wanted the animations to really fit my design style. So I turned to PowerPoint to create this. I chose to use PowerPoint for my animations because I already had access to the program and I wanted to be able to customize my graphics. Like I said before, I was working on a limited budget and limited time, so I needed a tool that I was familiar with and that I wouldn't have to buy an additional license for. Before we get into the build, there's some things to consider when creating animations and adding those animations to your e-learning. So one of those things is animating humans. So animating humans can be kind of interesting because human movement is so complex. And when you're animating humans, you want to keep it really subtle, which you're going to see here in just a second, where it's just a subtle little movement. And so if you try to animate all of those really complex human movements, it can get really cartoony. And more importantly, it's going to take a lot of time, which totally defeats the purpose of using this method. So when animating humans, keep it simple, nice and subtle movements, just to really just show learners that yeah, there's a little movement going on, but nothing too complex. The other thing to consider is when you're taking these animations and adding them into your e-learning experience, you want it to be adding to the experience. You don't want it to be distracting to your learners. So the example that I showed earlier with the branches coming through, I felt that it was most useful to show the learner the consequence of their choice, as opposed to just a prompt coming on the screen and saying, if you choose to stay in this room that's not tornado safe, you could be hurt by debris. That's not as effective as seeing it happen. And so those are the things you really want to remember with animations. When you're animating a human, keep it simple. And then when you're adding them into your e-learning experience, make sure that it is adding to the experience and not distracting your learners. Okay, so the tool we're using is PowerPoint, which I'm sure you are familiar with. If you don't have PowerPoint already installed on your computer, there is a browser-based version of PowerPoint that's free. And you can still do all of the things we're going to do here. The only thing you can't do is export that file as an MP4 file. But to keep this free and not having to purchase PowerPoint, if you don't already have it, you could use some kind of screen recording software like Loom or something and play the presentation of that PowerPoint, screen record it, and then take that video and import it into Storyline to create some activity. So we're going to stick with the desk-based version of it, but just know that that is an option as well. So I already went ahead and I pulled the assets in that I've used, and then we're going to talk about how we layer them to get the transition to make that cool, fun animation. Okay, so these images I took from FreePic. I moved them into Adobe Illustrator. But before I did that, I went ahead and downloaded these as vector images so that I could customize them. If you're not familiar with vector images, they allow for scalability and editability. So you can scale them as much as you need to when you're in a vector editing software like Adobe Illustrator. You can scale them as big as you need to without them getting pixelated, which is really great because then you can export them at a really high quality resolution. So when they come into your project, they're nice and crisp. Adobe Illustrator is not a free program, if you're not familiar with that, but there are some other really good alternatives. So one of the ones that I used as I was upskilling was Affinity Designer 2. I used that one because it had a 30-day free trial, and overall the price was cheaper than Adobe Illustrator. And then the other one I used was Inkscape. So I had to look at my notes to remember what the name of it was. Inkscape. So that is another free vector editing software. So you can take these images, download them as vector files, take them into an vector editing software, customize them as you see fit. For me, what I went ahead and did was this image here is the main image of the desk. It was actually a whole different row of different offices. So I pulled just this image, resized things as I needed to. I have my characters that I pulled from backgrounds. And then here is where you see after the branches crash into the desk, I went into Adobe Illustrator and was moving all of the vector nodes and adjusting the shapes to get something to look like it would be smashed into. You'll see the chair was sitting upright, now it's knocked over. That was another thing that was kind of interesting to think about was if branches come crashing through the ceiling, where are things going to go? What's going to be realistic to happen? Which was challenging, but also really fun. So I made sure that the plant fell over. There's this vase with flowers, and I thought since that's light, it would fly a lot further. So it's over here and the flowers are gone. There's the phone. I felt like that would slide off. The computer gets thrown to the side. This little pen gets thrown to the side. There's no more wires plugged in, right? Because this outlet was for the computer. So that plug-in is gone now. The outlet's still there, but the cord is gone. So those were things to think about that as it crashed through, what was going to happen? Where were things going to fly out? So those are all my graphics. And then of course I found a tree branch. And I used a lot of the same graphics throughout this whole experience. So these tree branches get used here where they're coming through the scenario, but also they are shown if you decide to go out of the building when it's not safe, you'll see debris flying through the air. I use these branches as well in that section too. So you can really use a lot of the same graphics to still get this cool effect and still making things really unique. So the background here, not too much. And you can see that just the shapes were just smashed things down a bit. And it's enough to just show that movement of showing the actions of what happened. Okay, so now that we have all of our assets, we're going to go ahead and get started with the actual animation piece. When you're animating in PowerPoint, it's really important to make sure everything that you need for the animation is all going to be on one slide. So we're going to layer things because if I just showed this image on one slide and then the next one I showed this image, it's not going to do this cool transition because what we're using is the morph transition. And so it's morphing from one image to the other. So from one slide to the other. But if I don't have this on one slide going to this one, it's just going to look like a normal transition where it just switches. So actually, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to copy this, paste it over here. Let's get it nice and ready. The other thing I should mention as well, that I don't want to forget, is the slide size. So I'm using a 16:9 because in Storyline, that's the ratio that I usually go for, a 16:9 when I'm designing. So I want to make sure that the output of this video is going to match the slide size of my Storyline file. So if you use the 4:3, go with 4:3. If you use 16:9, use 16:9. So just want to remember to mention that. Okay, so now let's add a new slide. And I'm going to go ahead and take this one. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to get it nice and scaled on here to fill the slide. Okay. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the transition. And we'll get into this in the next spot where we can adjust these numbers of how long it's taking for these things to happen. But what I want to show you is that if we don't have the images duplicated, it's not going to give us that cool little animation effect. So let's take a look. Okay, so if we start here, yeah, it doesn't give us the same effect where things are happening. It just kind of does this fade in, and that's not what we're going for. So what we want to do is we want to layer it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this image. We're going to work backwards. So I want to take this image, my final one, and I'm going to add that here. And I'll get it scaled again. Good. There we go. Keeps moving just a bit. All right, perfect. Okay, so I have it on here, scaled, ready to go. That's going to be the end image, right? And then I also know that I'm going to need these branches. But as I start, I'm not going to want the branches on the screen. Those are going to come in later. But I do know I want this scene to be there. So now I'm going to go ahead and layer this one on top. So I'll do the same thing, put it on here, scale it, and make sure it fits the screen perfectly. That looks good. Okay. Now we'll bring in our character. I'm just copying and pasting these. All right. Well, that's not the right scale. Perspective is super important. So let's scale them. It's pretty good placement. That seems like decent height. Maybe they can be a little bigger. When I'm trying to figure out the scale and perspective, I kind of look at items around here. So like looking at the computer and looking at this character here, kind of going with like the head to the computer size, figuring out what is a good like scale and balance. Okay, so we have that. Now for the trees. So like I showed you on that other example, if I don't have those trees in this beginning and then try to have them at the end, it's not really going to work. It's just going to like do this like little fade and show with them. So I want the trees here as well. Oh, give ourselves some room. Copy it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it outside of the scene. So I'm going to leave it out here. Make them a bit bigger. And duplicate it. Yeah, I think that should be good. It really doesn't matter at this point because they're off the screen. You get them lined up a bit. Okay. And I am going to leave them smaller at this point because again, perspective is important. So I want them to be able to like come down, and as they're coming down, it's kind of closer to us. So they're going to get a little bit bigger also. Okay, now we have our scene set. If we take a look at this. All right, so that's the scene we want. We don't see any other background stuff, but we know it's back there because that morph transition is going to help us morph into those images. So this is exactly what we want. In the example I showed you, what happened was our characters left off screen and then the tree branches came in. So that means I'm going to need 2 other slides. I'm going to need one slide for this character to leave, or for these characters to leave, and then the third slide for those things to come crashing in. So the best way to do this, make sure everything is all in the nice and same spots, is I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate the slide. Perfect. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and take this character and just slide them off the screen. One of the other things that I forgot to mention is like, as I was customizing these, I was even changing background colors in these images and stuff like that. And that was really like why I liked using PowerPoint and still like to use it for animation, is because you can really customize all of your graphics as opposed to something like Beyond where it may not be as customizable. And then you end up creating something that kind of looks like what everyone else is creating. And so creating these custom animations can really help you stand out, like it did for me. It helped me land my first client by creating something really cool and custom. Just a little side. Okay, so now we have our character off screen. They slid off. I'm going to add this morph animation, and we can see there, it kind of does that little preview. So let's take a look. That's a little fast. So maybe let's slow it just a bit. Pretty good. That's the other thing, right? We want it to be realistic. So yes, it's a dire situation. There's this emergency, but we don't want our health aid helper over here to like whip this lady out of the scene. So it should be a little bit of a smooth transition. Again, we see it. Perfect. Okay, Now the fun part, we're going to see the crash. Just like I did on the last one, I'm going to duplicate this. So actually, if you think about it like Vyond, if you've used Vyond before, you can create a scene and then you can continue from the last scene, and it kind of just duplicates that, right? And then you make the adjustments. Continue from the last scene, make adjustments. We're pretty much doing the same thing here. We created a scene, continue from the last one, we moved our guy to the side. Now we're going to duplicate, which is like continuing from the last scene. And now we can switch things up. So I know that I don't need this image anymore, right? Because we're going to see the crash, but I can't just delete it. It's going to cause that same just little fade thing to happen and not the cool morph transition that we're going for. So instead, I'm going to take this image and I'm just going to send it to the back. So it's still there. And what's happening now is we have these layers and it's going to morph to the next one, which is what we. All right, now it's going to happen. And let's see. I want my branches. Maybe I want the heavier parts here to crash down. Let's make them a little bit bigger. And actually we can even, adjusting them, even the movement, it caused that gosh. So maybe let's go a little bit bigger. And then this one here, I think is gonna go maybe like this. Let's see. Something like that. This one comes down a bit, just so it looks like it's gonna block everything. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing. Let's add that morph transition. Oh, well, we duplicated it, so it's already there. Perfect. We may have to change the duration, but let's preview how this looks. Okay, so you can see that timing wasn't perfect. The desk smashed before the trees came down. So we need to work on. So let's try. We may have to bring these down a little bit sooner. That's. So we may have to bring them down a little bit closer. That way they're not falling as far. So let's see. Getting better, getting better. Let's change up the timing. Okay, it's closer. We're getting closer. So this is probably the most time-consuming part, but it's really not even that time-consuming, but it's just trying to get those pieces down. So where I'm putting things maybe isn't working exactly like I need it to. So I'm going to go ahead and just adjust. So maybe it's going to crash in this way. And then this. Maybe it hits first. Here. Okay, let's see what that does. Closer. We're getting there. It's just missing it. Okay, I have an idea. So I know I want these to grow some and they're coming down. I did adjust them here, right? I adjusted the movement a bit. But let's go ahead and increase the size. Let's take a look. Better. That little gap was so much smaller now. So from where the tree is hitting the desk is what I'm looking at. And that gap was smaller. Okay, let's preview again. Okay, so it's still just a little bit off, but I have an idea. So if where it's coming is falling and it's not giving it enough time, then I need to add more movement. So right now these branches are like this and they're just kind of crashing down. So maybe if I take them and they come in and crash, that'll buy us some time. Let's do this. I'm going to shrink these down just a bit. And instead, let's turn them. And it may not seem like that big of a deal because why not just switch them? But remember, it's taking that actual tree. So it's if I'm looking at this one, it will become this one. It's morphing into that because that's the same copy that we did. And so I want to make sure that I'm giving those enough like enough time to move. Let's see. Something like this, maybe. Okay, so that's going to cause some more movement. So they were out like this. Now they're going to come in. Let's take a look. So much better, right? We saw it smash the desk and then crash down. So much better. Shiz knocks things off. Now, is that as realistic? Maybe not, but there's going to be some other things happening, right? So let's take one more look. Smashes, knocks things off. Again, this isn't going to be super elaborate or really intense, right? We're just trying to give just enough to our learners to really show them what's going on. We're adding to the experience. We're not here to like completely entertain. It's still about the learning. Okay, so now I don't need my assets slide anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And let's take a look. Okay, so we have it crashing down. Perfect. But I don't want to have to click the mouse, right? Because that's not going to allow me to pull out that MP4. What I need to add some transition so that it moves to the next slide on its own. So the duration is going to talk about how long it takes to make the movement. Then after is going to be like how long it takes to stay on that slide. So this one, we don't have any transition. I don't want it to happen on the mouse click, but I want to give them some time. So let's do 2 seconds. So what that means is this slide is going to stay up for 2 seconds. Then we're going to morph to this slide. The transition is going to take 2.5 seconds. So the person, all we have on this one is just the person leaving the scene. That's going to take 2.5 seconds. So after that transition, we want it to move on. So let's give it a little suspense. Let's do 1 second. So now what we have so far, we're going to be on this slide for 2 seconds. Then it's going to morph to this slide where we see the character slide out. It's going to stay here for 1 second. Then we're going to move here where the trees crash in. Let's take a look. Character gone. And trees. Perfect. All right, so we did that. And now the last step is going to be to export this file as MP4. So let's do that. And to do that, we're going to go up here to File. Actually, we should probably save this so we don't lose it. Something you should get into the good habit of doing is saving this. Okay, so we have it saved. Now we're going to go ahead and export this as an MP4 file. So File, Export, create a video. And then because we have it already set up, like with our animations and our timings, we don't have to do anything else because we're going to use the recorded timings and narrations. We could record a video. Again, I don't think this is possible on the web or the browser-based version, so I think it's only on this one. So recording the video will just allow you to like click and go through them on your own, but we're just going to go ahead and use the recorded timings and narrations and create a video. And there's our video. It's all saved just like the one that I showed you. All right. So some use cases. Of course, you can use this idea to animate a e-learning scenario like I showed you here, where this was a consequence and we got to show the learner as opposed to tell the learner. Another thing you can do is create interactive infographics. So if you take something, I'm thinking like the solar system, right? You see all of the planets laid out and you can morph and like zoom into one and then zoom back out, zoom into another one and zoom back out, and like add interactivity, like click so that people can zoom into things. You can also create like explainer videos, right? So you can see different things like coming on screen, coming off screen. You can use this with like text. I've played around with it and experimented where I've had like little boxes that like scroll open and then the animation is there, or like, sorry, the text is there and then it like scrolls back up and closes. So you can also do that with like explainer type videos. Another really cool thing is simulations. So you can probably see here how you'd be able to like zoom in on things, like I said, with an infographic, but do simulations that way. Another thing that's really cool in PowerPoint is they have 3D models. So you can pull in a 3D image and still use this morph transition to move things around. So if you have like a dinosaur facing the learner, you can create an animation so that like it does like a side profile. And then using the morph feature, you can like have it turn. And so they can like inspect this dinosaur and like learn all the like different anatomy of the dinosaur or something like that. So you can create a learning experience that way as well. So those are just some of the use cases. I'm sure there are plenty of others. I would love to know what you guys are creating or what you want to create using these ideas. Drawing in your learners with subtle animations doesn't have to be expensive, time consuming, or really complex. You can use a tool like PowerPoint, like we just did today. But remember, that's not the last step, creating that animation and exporting it as a video file. You're going to want to add some interactivity to create that learning experience. So you'll take that video file into a program, an authoring tool like Articulate Storyline 360. If you want to learn more about Storyline, make sure to check out Devlin's playlist on Articulate Storyline 360, where he goes through a bunch of different tutorials on the functionality that you can include in your learning experiences. If you're just starting your instructional design journey, be sure to grab the free Become an ID checklist that will start with telling you about the different softwares to learn as an instructional designer. All right, that's it for this one. I will see you in the next one. Bye.